Thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies as we continue with part 7. Robert Fludd, from Orders of Universal Reformation by Manly P. Hall. Robert Fludd, Esquire, mystic, philosopher, and doctor of medicine. The distinguished English metaphysician, Robert Fludd, Esquire, Robertus de Fluctibus, Doctor of Medicine, was born in Kent in 1574, the fifth son to survive of Sir Thomas Fludd. Dr. Robert insisted upon using Esquire with his name, because he believed that the honor of a good family was to be accounted superior to a degree bestowed by a university. Incidentally, he received his M.A. at St. John's College, Oxford, in 1598. He devoted the next 6 years to a grand tour of the continent. He returned to England and secured his doctorate in medicine at Christ Church, Oxford, in 1605. He had considerable difficulty, however, in securing his fellowship in the College of Physicians. He was examined 3 times before finally accepted, probably because the dignitaries of the college suspected the candidate of having a sickly interest in mysticism and the occult arts. Fludd practiced medicine in London at the same address for the greater part of his life, and gained considerable distinction for his methods of therapy, which would be regarded now as verging towards psychology. He insisted that the virtues of his medications must be supported by a noble and right-minded attitude on the part of the patient. This eccentric doctor maintained a pretentious establishment and was sufficiently successful to permit him to engage a private apothecary who kept shop on the premises. Emphasis upon spiritual considerations attracted to Dr. Fludd many sufferers who had been given up by other practitioners, and with those cases he was remarkably successful. Most of his numerous and lengthy writings were dictated at odd moments between appointments to an amanuensis, whose principal duty was to be present or available at any hour of the day or night. Dr. Fludd is remembered mostly for his voluminous books in scholarly Latin, and illustrated with curious figures and symbols derived from anatomy, astrology, numerology, music, comparative religion, and the Kabbalah. His curious little work entitled The Squeezing of Parson Foster's Sponge gained him some reputation as a controversialist, and, while probably the least of his writings, is one of only 2 works to be published in English. The good doctor occupied a strange place in the mental life of his day. He was one of those men out of time, in this case, too late. His thoughts were concerned principally with subjects and concepts which had disappeared from the public favor. About his only contribution to the furtherance of science was his early research with the barometer, and to the time of his death he stood firmly with Kepler on the wrong side of the controversy over the Copernican system. When Dr. Libavius published his diatribes accusing the Rosicrucians of attempting to overthrow organized society, he aroused the indignation of many generous scholars and idealists, including Dr. Fludd. This good physician summoned his amanuensis and dictated immediately a lengthy apology for the Rosicrucians entitled Seen Here. The book was first issued in Leiden in 1617 because the printers produced better work at lower prices than those in England. While it is evident from the text that Fludd was not at the time a member of the order, he championed its cause against the attacks of Libavius with sincerity, dignity, and a deep, reverent admiration. Then, fearing that he might have said something in his well-intended defense to displease the society, Fludd appended to his work a concluding address somewhat in the form of a letter. In this he wrote, "I desire nothing more fervently than to be the least in your order, so that I may be able to satisfy the curious and hungry cars of men, through worthy and dependable propagation and expansion of your honor and fame. If any man of his generation were worthy to be accepted into the house, Sancti Spiritus, it was amiable, learned Robert Fludd. Although Fludd's writings abound with concepts and precepts believed to be essentially Rosicrucian, only one other work associated with the name deals directly with the fraternity. This consists of 54 pages in folio, titled Summum Bonum, usually bound at the end of the work seen here, published in Frankfurt in 1627. The Summum Bonum bears no author's name, and its title page is ornamented with an engraving of an open rose. The fourth section of this essay attempts to describe the dwelling place of the Brothers of the Rosy Cross. Needless to say, the description is entirely symbolic. The Adepts of the Order abide in the house of God, of which Christ is the cornerstone. The temple stands upon the mountain of wisdom, and its dome is supported by those reborn men who have become living pillars in the everlasting house. As further evidence, there is appended to the work a letter written by one of the brothers of R.C. This letter discusses the immovable palace of the society, which is in the center of all things, the resplendent and invisible castle which is built upon the mountain of the Lord, out of whose root goeth forth a mountain of living waters and a river of love. Although it is not certain that Fludd was the author of the Summum Bonum, he is fathered with it as the most likely suspect. The relationship of Count Michael Mayer to Fludd's spiritual life has been much discussed. This distinguished German visited England about 1615. Some assumed that he was an emissary of the Rosicrucians and initiated Fludd. Others advanced the theory that Mayer himself was seeking initiation from the English doctor. The latter seems more probable, for in spite of all appearance to the contrary, Rosicrucianism almost certainly originated in England and migrated to the continent in search of suitable publishers for its manifestos and writings. The Reverend J.B. Craven, who devoted many years of research to the subject, summarizes his own findings and those of most other investigators thus: that a society of the nature of the Rosy Cross existed, and that both Mayer and Fludd were initiates, need not, I think, be doubted by any disinterested students of history of those wondrous 16th and 17th centuries. What its origin may have been, we shall, I suppose, never know with any certainty, though there is some ground for supposing that it was in existence in the later part of the 18th century. Its whole story is one of the most curious episodes in history. It is regrettable that so little is known about the private life of Robert Fludd. According to the Dictionary of National Biography, he died unmarried on the 8th of September 1637 in the house where he had practiced medicine for nearly 30 years. He was buried at Bearsted Church, and his grave was marked by a stone which he had personally prepared before his death. The following year, his nephew erected a monument consisting of a figure of Fludd at a desk, with an open book before him. In recent years, members of the English Rosicrucian Society, a research group with no roots in antiquity, have made pilgrimages to this shrine. Fludd was without a doubt the greatest of the English mystics, a man of wonderful insight and a devoted child of the Church of England. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.